We all know what is happening in Liberia. The general election is almost over, and the incumbent President George Weah has lost. And see who he has lost to. He has lost to a former vice president. 6 years ago, Liberians were jubilant in electing George Weah as their new president, with hopes of transformation and change for the country. We all know George Weah and what he did in his football career. So they expected he would bring the same miracles to politics. He didn't. They had so high hopes that he would transform their country so quickly because probably he has shown the world what he's capable of doing when he's committing himself to doing something. He didn't. 6 years ago, he won the election with 62% of the vote. Now, he is losing the election with 49%. So this drop of votes, this drop of support, tells a story that we need to read in detail and in true context. It raises a few questions because if you were famous, if you were popular 5 years ago, and you've been given power by the people that thought you were going to transform their country, and now, just in 5 years, you have lost everything. You have lost the people. You have lost the hope. You have lost everything they gave you. You have lost them. So what is happening in Liberia right now is typical of what happens in many, many countries globally, but particularly in Africa. Because the wave of change comes in with so much optimism and enthusiasm, and within no time it fades away. We have seen it in many, many countries where opposition leaders came in power and they disappointed the electorate. I'm not saying this to discredit opposition parties, but I want us to learn something from what is happening in Liberia. And there's a few things that we can focus on. One is what I just said. What went wrong with the support that George Weah used to get from the people? What happened to his popularity? Where did he go wrong in implementing the policies that his people trusted him to implement in the first place? That's number one. But two, President George Weah deserves some compliments. It's not typical of African incumbents to concede defeat, especially in these recent times. They don't. They rig elections and remain in power. In Africa, it has reached a point whereby the winners don't get to power. It has reached a point whereby even voting is becoming an issue now. People are losing hope in voting because they can predict who the eventual winner is going to be even before they go to vote. And this puts a very ugly mark on the face of democracy. And sometimes it raises questions as to whether we should go along with such a system that doesn't work in Africa. Because take the case of Liberia, for example. When this winning candidate is going to lead this country with only 52% of support in the winner-take-all system, what's the plight of 8%? Who is representing them anyway? Are they just completely written off because they didn't win? We need to see how we can go along and accommodate everyone who has taken part in the election, regardless of the numbers they've got. They need to be represented, they need to be valued, they need to be heard. Solidarity. The politics of solidarity would fit Africa more than the politics of isolation that we've been witnessing everywhere. But for this one, I wish to congratulate and compliment President George Weah for conceding and telling his party to concede. He has told other candidates in his party who have lost the election to concede in the interest of unity, solidarity, peace for Liberia. This is something that other African leaders should be able to emulate quickly and easily without much ado. We expect that future elections in other countries will have something to emulate from Liberia, and more specifically from President George Weah. One-term president, yes, whatever he has achieved is enough. Whatever he has failed to do, others will do. But there is another thing that I'm looking at. There is a wave globally of old people taking back the reins of politics, beating the young ones. You know, George Weah is only 57, and the incoming president, Boakai, is 78 years old. This scenario takes me to the United States of America. I'm seeing two old guys competing for the White House. What went wrong with the young generation? It's like the public is losing hope in the young people, in young leaders, or maybe specifically in some young leaders. I don't think the parties don't have young people who are competent enough to lead their countries, who can convince their people to support them, even the primaries. But look, the young men are being defeated by old men. Is there a shift in trust from the young to the old? I'm not sure. I'm posing this question. Maybe you have some answers to this. But we all know what Liberia has gone through in so many decades to reach where they are. They know what they've been through. It's good that President Weah was able to react the way he did. Otherwise, he'd have taken his country back to where it has been. And that's not where we want other African countries to go. But when we have elections that are constantly rigged in countries, the winners going into opposition and the losers taking power, it doesn't all go well for the countries and for the continent. So, despite whatever has been happening in Liberia, I'm here to congratulate Liberians, and more specifically to compliment President George Weah for conceding that he has lost after one term in power. We don't need to have many terms in office to prove ourselves. They have gauged his performance in 5 years, and finally they have decided to vote him out of power. And luckily enough, he has conceded and he is leaving office. This is a good example. Something to emulate, something to learn, something to be proud of.